off and the clock has started.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine.
Hey, welcome back to Relationships Through the Looking Glass. This is episode 6 to season 2. I'm so excited to welcome our two guests for this discussion. We have Blake Johnson, who is the host of Diary of a Mad Black Man podcast, as well as Felipe Khristopher Blue with More Than Therapy podcast. Both of these gentlemen are pioneers in their own right when it comes to mental health, and their voices are probably recognizable if you are someone who listens to a lot of podcasts within our community. Welcome to Wonderland, fellas. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Super grateful for being here today. My name is Blake, as she just said. I'm the host of Diary of a Mad Black Man. I also have a company called the Black Podcast Club, a social networking club for Black podcasters and creatives. I came into the podcast space to really try to heal myself and to share my story. I was in a very broken and deeply depressed state at the time when I started my podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting, nothing about the journey ahead of me or what it was going to become. So it really just is a journey I've been on. I've been learning as I go, but healing was probably the main thing that I was focused on. I really wanted to overcome the mental health challenges I was dealing with, and I didn't have people to talk to. It was still difficult for me to talk about it. Even still to this day, it's a process because there's so much stigma around mental health, especially in the Black community and specifically for Black men. So I'm sure we'll get into all that stuff in this episode. But yeah, that's enough about me. I'm just happy to be here and share space and to raise awareness about mental health and work towards ending this stigma.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we are so excited to have you with us. And Felipe, why don't you go ahead and allow the listeners too, who might remember you from the previous podcast, but also who might be new, who you are, what you do, your podcast, and why mental health in our community and relationships is so important.
Yes, I'm Felipe Blue. I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist located in Durham, North Carolina. I have a nonprofit program called More Than Therapy, which basically fills the gaps regarding mental health here in the Triangle area. My podcast, More Than Therapy, is based on, just providing people information to remove the stigma associated with mental health and addiction, to let mental health be more palatable, to engage our people more into the service. As traditionally they shy away from the service because of a lot of bad things that happened in the past, or what they thought they know of what happened in the past, especially regarding mental health and health related issues. I want to be the change I want to receive. And that's why More Than Therapy exists. And that's why I'm here today, to be a part of that change agent, be that change agent. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And thank you for doing what you do. And also, Blake, thank you for doing what you do. Both of you are having such a huge impact within our community. All right, Keisha, you want to let our listeners know just who you are and why mental health is so important as it relates to our community and relationships?
Yes, sure. Hey, again, I go by Keisha, but my name is Nikisha Keith. I am also a licensed professional counselor. I have a women empowerment group that's entitled Change Women Break. That group actually inspires women to reach their full potential, as well as to assist them with healing from past traumatic experiences that may be a hindrance to them now. I believe mental health is very much so important when it comes down to relationships, because it's important to understand who you are as an individual, know your challenges, get the necessary help that you need, so that when you connect with with your partner, whether it's opposite or whatever your choice is, you'll be able to be your best in that relationship with the opposite person. So I think it's really, really important that we deal with our mental health and make sure that we are aware of challenges with mental health and get the necessary help.
Great. Thanks. So again, why I feel this topic is so important in our community is because A, of the stigma, and B, there's such a push off or standoff approach when we talk about it. There's jokes made about it, right? There's the uncomfortable space of when a diagnosis is made. But then there's also the element of when a diagnosis is made, what does that even mean for the individual and for the people who are in the support roles for that individual? So I'm hoping that this episode will bring some light that can be supportive for individuals who might have gotten a new diagnoses, who are concerned about some mental health challenges that they receive, or to assist or support somebody going through their own challenges. Before we begin, I do want to note that even though we do have licensed clinicians, certified individuals on the call, this by no means is supposed to represent or replace any professional help. And if anything in this conversation triggers you or you feel you need some additional support, please contact your local mental health specialist who will be able to provide that for you. So as we begin, we're going to go ahead and jump into the term mental health. And I'm just going to throw this question out to Blake and Felipe. When you hear that term mental health, what exactly does that mean to you? And in your experience, what does that mean to the Black community as a whole? So we'll start with Blake. When we use the term mental health, it's a broad statement. So what does that really mean to you? And what do you feel it means for our community as a whole?
Um, I'll start with what I think it means for the community, and then go into what it means for me. So, mental health for our community, something I just want to say is it's something that everybody has. If you are a living and breathing human being, you have mental health because it's a part of your overall health and wellness. Now, when it comes to mental illness or symptoms of an illness, that is something that I think almost everybody will experience at some point in their life, but there's certain symptoms and certain illnesses that are very taboo, and it makes it very difficult for us to deal and heal with those because they're so taboo and it's difficult to understand within our community. And so some people may have an illness, but that doesn't mean it's forever. Some people may experience symptoms of a mental illness, and they may last forever. There's different things that people can understand. But the main point that I want to make here is that everybody has mental health, but some people experience symptoms of an illness, and that illness does not have to be forever. For me personally, mental health really means the difference between life and death. And I say it like that because I know that if my mental health is not on point, if it's not a priority, it can literally mean death for me because I've dealt with suicide ideation and I dealt with it for so long that I've had suicide attempts before in the past. So I now know and understand that mental health is literally life or death for me. And if it is not my number one priority, if there is something that is impacting my mental health in a negative way, it can trigger me in ways that it may not trigger or affect other people. So for myself, personally, I have to always think about my mental health. It's like something I think about every single day because of just where I am on this journey. So that's really what mental health is and what it means for me and the community.
Awesome. Thank you for such a detailed explanation and for your transparency. And Felipe, what same question. What does mental health mean to you? And do you feel when within our community as a collective, what's the connotation or what it means?
Well, he summed it up so beautifully. There's nothing I could really add per se. And thank you for that, sir. And thank you, like she said, for
Okay,
your
you're welcome.
transparency. For me, mental health is just a part of self, mind, body, soul. And that, if something's disrupted in any of those domains, it could disrupt the other domains, the whole person. Mental health is, to be able to navigate this world and be well, to not have impairments or disruptions in your life as it pertains to the world you have to navigate, which is becoming increasingly more difficult to do, especially post-Trumpageddon.
Mm, I,
Hmm?
no, I was gonna say I like the way you just said that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we have a lot of healing to do, and we have to
Right.
heal ourselves mentally. It's a shame that we pay more attention to our physical symptoms and address
Right.
them more readily than we do our mental health symptoms. While if you say you have a mental health diagnosis, you may be scorned or stigmatized. If you have cancer, you're loved and taken care of. If you have heart disease, you're loved and taken care of. If you have diabetes, as long as it's not really type 2 and it's because you're obese or whatever, more than likely you're going to be loved and taken care of. When it's
Right.
bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or even depression or anxiety, it's almost like, man, you could fix that, or they don't want to be bothered with you. In our community, well, in my community, especially in the rural South, there was a lot of talk, oh, that guy's touched, or they was always put into a category that didn't belong to the norm.
Yeah,
And
I
that's-
want to add something to that. I really like how you said how it can, like, it's like a domain and it can affect other domains.
Mhm.
Something I've learned is that, when you're in a healthy mental state, you're going to naturally make better decisions that are just healthy for your overall health and wellness. Like when I'm depressed and not in the best mind state, I don't want to get up and cook. I don't want to drink water and eat healthy and exercise and stuff like that. But when my mental health is on point, it allows me to make other decisions that are better for me, that impact my health and wellness in other ways as well. So I really appreciate you saying that, because that's something that's a part of the stigma too, which is that I think a lot of people in our community don't understand how mentally, when you have mental illness or symptoms of mental illness, it'll impact other areas. And we've been also conditioned to live with mental illness. The amount of trauma that Black people in this country have experienced generationally still impacts us to this day. And I think it's just important to understand that when you are in a healthy mental state, it'll allow you to make other healthier decisions that impact more than just your mental health.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Keisha, what's your input on why, or what you feel mental health is, and kind of piggybacking and co-signing on how it impacts everything. Like if I'm not having a good day or something has occurred in my life, it definitely bleeds over to everything. So I just wanted to co-sign on that. But yeah, Keisha, what is the term mental health as it relates to you, and how you feel it relates collectively to our community?
Just as what the other two gentlemen said, when it came down to mental health being seen as a stigma, excuse me, as well as pretty much when it comes down to mental health, the name itself, mental health. People associate that, of course, with, oh, you got a mental health issue? Oh, no, you crazy. You're this, you're that. When, in all honesty, all of us can look in that DSM-5 and find some diagnosis that matches every one of us. So whether it's from a phase of life, dealing with some symptoms of something, or it's a triggered from alcohol and drugs, it could be from past traumatic experiences, but we all fit into that circle of mental health. Now, where those symptoms pop out at, it could be because something triggered it. I think it's important to be more welcoming of someone that has mental health. In regards to if someone had cancer, you be more understanding and loving. But if someone is diagnosed with schizophrenia, then it's like, oh, stay away from that person. They hear voices. And, with just looking back at patients that I've dealt with different mental health issues, including myself, I struggle with anxiety from time to time. It's hard. It's really, really hard to even admit that, yes, something is wrong. And it takes a lot of strength, energy, and support to take that step to walk out and reach out for the necessary help. And then to let others know, this is what I have going on. And yes, I do need your support. So that it's really, it's challenging, and it takes a lot for a person to be able to step out and to do that. So I think it's really, really important that we embrace one another, especially when it comes down to mental health. Check in on your okay friends, and just to make sure that they are good mentally. And because of what this, especially with African Americans, what we have been through over the years, it is a lot of trauma that's being passed down, from one generation to the next. So that's still mentally what it's done to people. I even look at, with my grandmom before she died, and she always had such, I think it was more coming from fear of what she's experienced growing up in the South. So because of that trauma, it rolled down to us, and it does something with your mental, the way you look at people, the way you approach them. So as stated before, we all are a part of the circle of mental health, and we can't all pinpoint a diagnosis in that DSM-5 that matches us. But it's just a matter of this: is this a symptom that came along because of something, a trauma, and once that heal, it goes away? Or is this something that's permanently a part of you, and learning how to deal with that instead of self-medicating with alcohol and drugs, with sex, or anything else to kind of eliminate the symptoms, for, I guess, temporary eliminating of the symptoms. So I know I said a mouthful.
No. And I'm glad that you brought some of those statements up, because I know I'm full transparent here. My diagnosis is general anxiety disorder, meaning everything makes me anxious. But I I have used that to the benefit of myself. So it's not always something to have a situation where you're terrified of what a diagnosis is. And I'll speak to that a little bit as we get further on when I was diagnosed. There was a transition for me to accept the diagnosis and to learn that I am not the diagnosis. These are just behaviors that I have, and being able to pinpoint why I have them, but also how to address them. But we'll talk about that later on, because I want to kind of jump into this next topic of concern. Everybody kind of hinted to it already. Why do you feel there's so much stigma in our community over mental health? And when I'm saying our community, the Black community, the African American community, why do you feel that that stigma is there? We talked about generational trauma, historical trauma. Um, we do know that has an impact, but in your personal experiences, why do you feel we have such a stigma around it that looks like it's even more intense and enhanced than some of the other populations in our on our planet? And I'll throw that first to Blake, and then jump over to Felipe.
I this question is a question that I find very common around, just discussions about mental health. Why does the stigma exist in the Black community? I think a lot of it comes from the oppression that we experience here in America. When you think back to, like, I think about like my grandmother and my mom, those generations that came before me, how they had to live. You had to be strong. You had to, fight for, your survival, and, really be on your P's and Q's as far as being a strong and solid person, because this country was actively and overtly trying to oppress us and keep us in conditions that were less than, our white counterparts in this country. I also think that the stigma exists because of a lot of shame. I know for myself personally, I suppressed a lot of my symptoms with drugs, sex, and alcohol throughout the past couple years. Um, it's to a point now, like I still use marijuana. I still smoke weed from time to time. I use CBD as well. And the thing about it too is, now that I've learned what CBD is, it's helped me to not always have to feel the need to be high all the time. And I think that a lot of that comes from, us as a people not wanting to show the negative things that we may go through, or things that may be deemed to be negative. Like if you're sad, if you're depressed, if you are feeling anxious, people be like, yo, what's wrong with you, bro? Like, you good? And it's also, just common to be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm straight. We're the kind of people that push through. We're survivors. We're fighters. Go hard all day, hustle 7 days a week, no sleep. That's kind of embedded in our culture. So to now have a need to talk about the things that are not so good, that aren't dope and flashy, and really kind of part of the mainstream culture for Black people, it enables the stigma to continue. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that when we talk about what mental illness is, or what it can be, just in general in society as a whole, it's stigma around it. I think if we remove the layer of which I know we're talking about the Black community, but just mental health and illness in general. You think about what that means. You think about people in straitjackets and stuff like that, or people confined to mental institutions. And, that is compounded in our community because, again, like I said, we're the generation, or we're the kind of people that have to push through to get through, survivors. We're told to be strong, not show emotions, not appear to be weak. And we're in a constant fight every day, especially here in America, to live prosperously. You think about like how Felipe just said, Trumpageddon, it was very apparent now. And I think the veil of what racism really is in this country is now lifted. So there's just so many challenges that the Black community faces. And in order for us to survive, unfortunately, for many years, our mental health could not be our priority. We weren't afforded the luxury to have mental health and services available to us, or to have forums like the one we're having now to talk and share about our personal individual experiences. So there's so many barriers, so many levels to this question. Yeah, those are just my thoughts for now. I'm gonna pass it to Felipe next.
Well, he said a mouthful, a thoughtful, a big brain full of thoughts regarding that. He captured it perfectly, as he often does. I'm definitely a fan of his. That's probably why I'm saying these things.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
All I can add to that is that, and it's just really just an add-on, because there's nothing else I can say definitively different, is that our society, like he said, we're supposed to be deemed strong. What I'm saying? Society holds us to a caliber high in some ways, weaker in many other ways. In our own community, we feel we have to be stronger than, we have to be better than, we have to be 150% to be 80% as deemed by others. In the past, even in the generations that I come out of, when somebody was sick, having a mental health crisis, and they were sent away or hospitalized, institutionalized for a long time or a short period of time, the medications that they were put on radically changed who that person was. And people feared that. They didn't want that, because they saw what happened to Uncle Timmy when he went away after having a psychotic break, because he had PTSD related to his Vietnam experience. That when he came back, he was drooling and walking slowly, basically a zombie. And they associated mental health, help, with that image, with that family member who's now an outsider. I think that happens more often than not, especially in the rural South. Additionally, we don't want to feel less than. We don't want to feel like there's something wrong with us. We want to be able to be who we are without having that label. And I think it's that label association which keeps us from it. Nobody wants to be labeled. Where I teach, we're not our diagnosis. Our diagnosis is just an attribute of us that can be dealt with effectively. But when you hang on to a label, then that label then defines you. And no one that I know of wants that label.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. And both you two gentlemen brought up some very, very detailed experiences. And from what it feels like, or what I'm hearing, the common thread is fear. Even though the fear might be mapped to different elements or reasonings, but fear, I don't want to be labeled. Fear, I don't want to be seen as crazy. Fear of what that might look like to the outside, or fear of I'm no longer in control of my own behaviors. And I know for me, that was the number one standpoint, right? We are already behind the curve, right? We are already fighting to get to just middle ground that our counterparts get just by being birthed the right race, right? So we're already fighting. So this is just something else that we have to fight. And it's a part of who we are. And that is exhausting, having to, when someone's talking to you and you feel an anxiety attack coming and you're having to count down in your head, but still act like you're present in the conversation. When you have to psych yourself up before you go into a crowded area because you don't know if you're going to have any anxiety issues that come up. Or when you wake up in the morning and you just can't get out the bed and you don't know why. It's a fear of being weak. It's a fear of not understanding. And it's a fear of not knowing what to do in this experience at the same time, knowing you're living in a country that's already fighting against you. And it's fearful. It's something that a lot of people don't bring up or discuss because we don't know what's going to be the outcome, right? Um, and Keisha, what about you? Why do you feel that there's such a stigma within the Black community about mental health?
I like I said before, I think it's a issue because of the mental part. Mental, they associate that with crazy. Something's wrong with you. So I think that that's one of the major issues when it come down to, you know, the African American community is as it relates to mental health. So I think that's what it is.
Right.
How do we get past that? I would think getting past that stigma would be talking more openly about it. Um, that's one of the major things. I think talking more about it and making people feel more comfortable with sharing. I'm really big on support groups. And I think if we could, as a community, have more support groups out there in the communities, it doesn't have to be at a counseling agency or, you know, something like that, but just having more support groups where people are transparent and talking more about it. I think more people will open up about their mental health symptoms, even if they don't know what it is, and can get the necessary help to be directed to get treatment for those symptoms.
Absolutely. And before we when I'm about to hand the mic back to Blake, but just what you just said, I have gotten more support from close friends and even coworkers on situations that I've gone through than I've gotten from the white therapist who's sitting across the table because she just doesn't understand me at a certain level. I've had clients come to me and say they would specifically wait until my schedule freed up because they felt they could relate to me because I looked like them. There is a unity within our community that comes with providing services because we have a shared experience. Even if we haven't lived that experience, we have a historically shared experience, and it just brings together a different element. And I'm not saying you can't get amazing services from somebody of a different race. I'm just saying the quality and experience for me personally has been different. And a lot of times it wasn't from somebody who was a licensed therapist. It was somebody who was honest and who was able to provide me support when I needed it. And I was not fearful that what I was going to say was going to be held against me. So, for anyone who's listening, if a barrier is I don't have the money to seek out therapy as it relates to talk therapy and things of that nature, there are other avenues that you can get services and support. Now, if you're looking for medication and medication and management, if that's concerned, of course, you're going to have to get that from a professional individual. But if your concern is, I just need someone to talk to, seek out someone to talk to, somebody who that you're comfortable with, because you don't want to carry something alone and don't have an external experience that somebody might be able to help you, but you're just too scared to speak. So I'm going to hand the mic to Blake. What are some barriers that you have seen within the Black community about getting mental health care, and what are some ways around that to assist people who might have those barriers who might be listening?
Um, wow, there's a lot of barriers. I'll just start there. Like there's a lot of barriers when it comes to seeking help for mental health challenges. I'll share some of my own personal experiences. When I was a teacher, you know, I had top-notch health insurance. And when I started to seek help and support, I would go and I would try to find a therapist, and therapists were booked out for 2 and 3 months. There was a limited number of therapists available that looked like me. You know, I didn't really know or understand how to even find or what I call date a therapist and find out if this person is going to be a good fit for me. I think some of the other barriers are, you know, this idea of like I think you said it earlier, you know, this idea of fear. For me, like, it was also the fear of people knowing that I'm seeking these resources, right? The affordability of these services was very, very challenging for me, especially in the beginning of my journey. And I think that those are just some of the many obstacles that we experience when we're seeking mental health, especially within the Black community.
Absolutely. And how about you, Felipe? What do you think some of the challenges are that you have seen within the Black community in seeking out mental health support?
Some of the challenges I've seen, affordability, they might just have enough from week to week, check to check. And a private therapist or, a therapist that's attached to an insurance panel, it might be you're going to decide between dinner or getting therapy, decide between a service like an oil change or tire rotation or therapy. They may see that it's not worth the investment, or that it's an investment they can do without because other things need to be taken care of. I think that's one of the biggest, challenges, is that their priorities, so they're not prioritizing their mental health because they have to prioritize everything else. It's a shame that, we get paid less than our other race counterparts in many ways. Yet we have the same bills, we have the same experiences. We go to the bank and we get a mortgage. Our APR is higher than other races. Our car loans are higher than other races. We can have the same credit score, but it would impact us with a higher rate than any of our counterparts. And I think that impacts our mental health as well as our stability in this community, because with paying higher costs, it keeps us to being able to afford readily things that could help us and benefit us in the long run. I make a pretty penny, but of course I'm taxed heavily. And my insurance, you would think that a mental health agency's insurance would have a great mental health plan. It's not. I have to pay out at least $5,000 before any of the benefits truly kick in.
Yeah, and that everything that you said, you and Blake, it's set up in the community of the situation, are just the mindset is set up that everything else comes in front of mental health. But like we said earlier in the episode, your mental health affects everything. So it's like a catch-22. And having to be intentional about what you do when it comes to that is something that's a personal responsibility. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
Well,
yeah,
definitely. We
I
know
definitely
better.
want. Now, I wanted to add something to like what Felipe just says. This idea of affordability. It's been a number of years, like since I've had health insurance, and so a lot of the therapists I've worked with have been in just a private, like their private therapists are literally paying out of pocket full price. And I found that the average therapist is anywhere from like at least $100 to $200 per session. And that's just 1 hour a week. So we're talking about maybe $400 to $800 a month just to speak to somebody for an hour a week. So when we talk about the Black community and we're spending $400 to $800 a month to speak to somebody for a week, and you think about all the layers and barriers of stigma and things that come with that, it's just extremely difficult to get the help, and then to even find somebody that's qualified that meets your needs and you like to talk to. So I just want to throw that in there because that's something that I've experienced, and I'm still experiencing this idea of affordability to get mental health. But I'm also fortunate that in the community that I've cultivated, I have met a lot of therapists who are just like, hey, if you ever need to talk, just call me. So that's how I've actually honestly been able to get by over this past year, is literally therapists that are just like, I just have their number and I'm able to call them, and they've been helping me.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. And there's such a shortage of our community that's represented in this field. And that was one of my whys on moving towards a doctorate, because there's such a shortage. And with me working with trauma clients who specifically said if they couldn't find somebody who they felt represented who they were or could understand their experiences outside of the therapeutic session, they just weren't going to do anything. And that spoke to me more than, oh my gosh, so many more years of reading and dissertation and now on oral defense. It was the need of my community for individuals like us to step into those roles to help, to guide, to be that lighthouse, right? So affordability, absolutely. And prioritizing, absolutely. All barriers.
Just wanted to add one more little layer to that too, beyond just the affordability and prioritizing, is self-medicating. Versus someone reaching out, they will self-medicate when it comes down to like alcohol and drugs of that nature, because they don't want to be on the meds. They may have tried counseling before, and the medications they were putting on might have put them in that zombie stage. And unfortunately, when it comes down to medications for mental health, just like for any other diagnosis, you may have to try different types of meds, different doses before you find the correct one. So once a person possibly have experienced that and they hit that zombie stage and they don't feel like themselves, they don't go back. They run from that. So they go back to what worked for them. And that's alcohol and drugs. Hey, I'm good. I can come down off my high. If I want to get back high again, okay, this is cheaper, getting this dime bag or whatever, than going back to these people gonna make me crazy. They say I'm crazy, but that meds is really making me crazy. So that's another barrier too. I just wanted to add.
I back that up. And I'm huge. I'm huge where they, being a veteran, the first thing they do is throw all types of meds. You don't even got to pick it up. They just send it to you in the mail. And I'm not. The first experience I had was with Zoloft. And people usually say, oh, that's a low, that's not that intense. I did not like the way it made me feel. And then, other medications, the fear or how you feel when you're coming off of it is it was terrifying because I didn't want it in my system anymore, but you just can't stop taking it. You can't just go cold turkey. There will be a physical response to this. So anything affecting my brain chemistry, I made a very conscious effort to say, I'm not doing that. I will treat my anxiety issues, my post-traumatic stress challenges in a different way, because I did not like the way medication made me feel. One of my therapists said I have an addiction to work, and I throw myself into work to the point where it numbs me out. I'm very guilty of that. So it's not just drugs, alcohol, sex, and shopping. Some people use work to numb themselves out. Being busy can numb yourself out. And I think Blake was about to say something.
I was actually gonna add to the conversation about medications. I've tried medications, pharmaceutical medications in the past. Actually, it's funny you mentioned Zoloft. That was one of the first medications I took back in college. But my experiences with medication has been up and down, very similar to like how you alluded to. And I do self-medicate at this point. Like I said, I use cannabis, I smoke weed. But what I've also done is I've discovered CBD. And CBD doesn't have the psychoactive effect that marijuana has, or weed, traditional weed, when you think about it. So I don't feel high all the time. Yet at the same time, I know that eventually I want to kind of phase that out. But I'm also in a space to where I really don't know, because I've been diagnosed with several different things. And like I said, because of the lack of insurance and just access to resources right now, I'm just not in a position to be able to really find somebody that could really diagnose me and that could really go through the process of getting proper medications from a doctor. My experience with a lot of the medications I've been on, they take weeks, if not months, to feel the actual effects of the medication. So you start taking this medication and you're still experiencing the same symptoms. Nothing is changing. And then when when he does finally kick in, you're like, what the hell is this? This is not even who I am. You know what I'm saying? So that's why for me, I'm gonna just be transparent and say like, yo, I'm gonna smoke my weed until I find something else, because it is my medicine right now, and I've also learned that at one point I was addicted to marijuana. I'm not addicted per se now, because I know I use it for a reason. I don't use it to escape anymore. I use it to primarily to quell and to deal with symptoms. Like at nighttime, if my anxiety is too high and I can't go to sleep, I'm going to smoke me some weed and I'm going to go to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Which is I could probably get something over the counter that will do that, but I'm also going to have other adverse side effects to the over the counter stuff, and that has been my experience. And I also want to be very clear and say this too: medication for some people is necessary. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm not against pharmaceutical medications, because I do understand that the idea of a chemical imbalance in the brain and in the body, and that there are over the counter medications that can help with that. I also understand that marijuana is probably not the best thing to be taken when you're depressed, because it fuels depression. So there's so many factors that come with medication. And the thing that I always err on the side of, especially for me personally, is I have to do what's best for me, and I have to make sure that what I'm doing and how I'm using it, specifically with weed, that it's not in an escape like mindset. Like, I got to get high because I'm feeling like this. Like, it's kind of like a last resort kind of thing.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, for certain experiences and individuals, medication is absolutely necessary. If there's an imbalance in chemical imbalance in the brain, there's that's a medical need. So absolutely to what you're saying. But I also like the fact that you said you have to find what's right for you. And when an individual, early on in my experience of trying to find what's going to work, when I said, I'm really going to go ahead and just work on meditation and being able to calm and work on my schedule. For me, scheduling is important because it keeps me calm, because it's about a control thing for my anxiety. So being able to understand my diagnoses, being able to understand how it impacts me, because everybody doesn't have the same experience just because you have the same title. Does that make sense? Like, my anxiety might look different from somebody else's anxiety. My post-traumatic stress symptoms might look different from somebody else's. So you have to find out what works for you. And as we get close to the end, because we can go on for forever, like, this is such a heavy topic. Um, Felipe, what are some indicators that your mental health is impacting your relationships? Because that's another thing. When you're dealing with this internally, when you have a partner, they're dealing with it too. So, what are some ways that you've seen, either in your clients or your personal life, where mental health issues and challenges have impacted relationships?
To be honest, I think mental health has impacted every single relationship I've had in my life, including adolescence, including pre-adolescence. My mom diagnosed with bipolar 2, what I'm saying? I'm diagnosed with bipolar 2. I know that, the highs and lows were troublesome, especially the highs when I had impulsivity and had maladaptive and addictive behaviors that did not correlate with being in a relationship of honesty and openness and trust. Um, Even if it wasn't that diagnosis, depression could just impact, your ability to commit to that person, isolating, staying withdrawn, not being as open and communicating. In some cases, depending on how severe, not attending appropriately to your ADLs or your responsibilities. But even outside of that, even if it's a mild diagnosis or you don't have any of those attributes, that person may just see you differently or see you as being weaker than, because you are diagnosed with a mental health issue or going through a mental health issue. You might have been the strongest, most He-Man, Popeye man in the world. But once she sees you break down, she may not see you in the same light. She may be the most strongest superwoman that you know. But once she breaks down, you may lose respect for her or seek solace somewhere else because she's not giving you what you need because she's going through what she's going through.
Absolutely. And even, let's look at it a little bit more in more depth, or unpackage it. And I'm gonna throw this to Blake and even Keisha. How about the times where people aren't diagnosed? They don't have a because not everybody has a diagnosis, right? And you have these behaviors that, like you said, to be withdrawn, to be um, hyper vigilant within the relationship, but you talk to them and I don't need any help. I'm fine. But it's still impacting the relationship. Like, what does that look like? And what are some things that we can tell listeners who are either experiencing some of these challenges or their partner is, on how to work together to address some of those concerns?
Um, So when I was first, I'll say when I was first introduced to my mental health and wellness challenges, I was in a relationship. We were very serious in our relationship at that time. And my family, I mean, like they completely distanced themselves from me. My sister moved out of my house that we were sharing together and everything because she said she was afraid of me. And my partner at the time, she was that saving grace that I had at that point in my life, because when I would be up in the middle of the night crying, going through stuff, or, forgetting to take my medication, she was the one who was helping me to adjust to this new process. She was the one some days who wake me up and ask me, did you take your medication today? And so when I talk about intimate relationships, you really got to also try to understand why somebody is the way that they are. I think a lot of times, like I'll say like this, like for example, when I think of people who are in domestic violence relationships, that abuser was 9 times out of 10 abused. And that abuse that he experienced is causing other areas of his life to not be okay or not be on point. So now is in turn doing the same thing that was done to him, which I feel like people that abuse other people have some sort of mental illness, because it's like, why would you want to hurt or harm somebody else? And so if you're in a relationship or you're dealing with somebody who is experiencing behaviors that may not seem norm, or they're not conducive to the relationship, you have to really dig deep and try to discover why, do like a root cause analysis. Why is this person always, anxious? Or why is this person always, asking me where I'm at? These can all be symptoms of anxiety or something like that. So you never really know. I think the ultimate thing when it comes to relationships is to be understanding as best as possible, and be willing to work through and grow with your partner through that process. Be willing to have those difficult conversations. Be willing to also give them space and time to heal and adjust to whatever they may be experiencing, or what symptoms or behaviors they may be displaying.
Absolutely. And before you chime in, Keisha, I just kind of really wanted to drive that home. When you are in a relationship with somebody who has a diagnosis, or somebody who doesn't have a diagnosis but are exhibiting some of those behaviors, if you're going to be in that relationship all in, you're kind of signing on for that. You're signing on for the moments
Right.
when they're having an episode. You're signing on for the moments when they get withdrawn and pulled away. And it's beneficial to educate yourself not just on the individual, but learn the triggers. It's kind of like doing research on your partner so you can be a better support
Absolutely.
system, but also expect that in return when you're not having, an A+ day. And that's a part of what relationship building is, and not at the first sign of, like what Blake said, a hypervigilant attitude or somebody acting out of character, to say I'm out. If you are really wanting to put a nurturing and be there for that person, to kind of dig deeper, where is this coming from? Is it circumstantial, or is it something more? And if you're going to be that person, then be that person. If not, move out the way so that person can find a support system that's there authentically and be willing to grow together, if that makes sense.
Yes, I agree. I think it's important for the person who is dating someone who has a diagnosis, they know that it's a diagnosis versus undiagnosed. I start with that part first. Like you said, to know what you signed up for, not to expect something from this person that they're not able to give to you. It's not that they're not willing, but they may not be able, may not be in a good place to give you that. So that's important. Also, having that partner to go with that person from time to time into the counseling session, so that, I mean, it's best. I know when there's a client in front of me, I'm like, so how's things going? Oh, it's going really, really good. But if I can get that person who lived with them to come in, that can say, you know what, well, Johnny had a rough moment here or whatever, just to give some insight. I think that will help that person who's receiving treatment even the better. And it'll also give them the opportunity to know, with that person agreeing to them coming into that session periodically, to know, how can I best support Johnny when Johnny's at this place? Or, what can I do to be a better support? I think that is definitely key. A lot of patients, when they come in for counseling, they never, okay, I'm always asking, hey, can this one come in? They never, some of them don't, but some of them, the ones who do, they actually are, able to kind of manage their symptoms a little bit better, because now we got a team. We have, me as the therapist, but you also have family members who are there to give you positive feedback, to help you, assist you with positive coping, instead of saying, well, you know what, don't take your meds today. We're going to go get drunk. We're just going to get this off of your mind. We're going to get real, real high. You're going to be okay. We'll get back on it. You're having a tough moment. So it's important to have somebody who understands and be educated on that. Now, for dating someone or being married to someone, or even having a relative of someone who's undiagnosed, that is tough. And if that person is not willing to identify, hey, I need some help in this area, something is wrong, if they're in total denial, they will sometimes run people away. It will get to the point where either they'll have a mental break, where they have to be hospitalized, whether law enforcement or whatever's involved, or they'll get to the point where they have lost enough. They've lost people from around them. They may have lost jobs, or different things that have happened. And then they're put in a position where maybe I do need help. So
right. You gotta make a choice. You gotta make a choice. And I tell people too,
yes.
Change happens when the feeling of being uncomfortable supersedes the fear of what's to come.
Right.
And that's when change happens. Change happens when you're uncomfortable. And you
Right.
might lose relationships, right? You might lose, I've seen people lose families. I've seen people lose, like you said, jobs. And now it's a situation where, you know what? I think I need to see somebody. So as we get close to wrapping this up, Felipe, I'm going to throw this question to you. That support person in someone's life who's going through mental health challenges, practicing self-care is super important for that individual, because a lot of times you can get so pulled in to what that other individual is experiencing that you lose sight of yourself. And a phrase that I use a lot is, don't get so busy adopting other people's demons that you forget to take care of your own. And we want to make sure that you are, especially us in the mental health field, you're so busy trying to help somebody else that you start to neglect your own needs. So what are some ways or some ideas or some things you've experienced or done that you've been able to take care of yourself and make sure you're checking in with yourself and not getting lost in someone else's space?
One of the best resources that I'm aware of is NAMI, support groups that address people who may be experiencing mental health issues or dealing with people, family, loved ones, regarding their mental health issues, in order to gain skills to navigate that, as well as get the support as it pertains to navigating that. Another option would be, getting therapy, or, talking to somebody regarding the issue. They might see it, they might deem it as a stigma on themselves as they deal with it. But if you're dealing with somebody with a mental health issue, there's going to be a skill set, or there's going to be something that you're going to need in regards to support that. I think you can get into support groups like NAMI. Then it might be more beneficial to get it in therapy. I tell my clients this all the time. You're in a very unique position being in therapy. You're learning skills that the layperson, what we deem normal, but we don't like to use the word, don't have. You know your triggers, you know your warning signs, and you know how to develop action plans to address such that Joe Blow down the street, who never had a mental health crisis, doesn't have. So when they do come into a crisis, they do not know how to adequately deal with it or deal with it inappropriately.
Right. And even for individuals listening saying, well, he doesn't have a diagnosis or I don't have one, but I still see some of these, because people have used so many terms like, oh, he's a narcissist and he's narcissistic, right? And or I have this, or this person has this. And there's so many terms that people are flying and throwing around. But at the end of the day, you have to know your partner. You have to know what their triggers are. They need to know what yours are. Might not be associated with an actual diagnosis at all. But the key is, if you're going to be a support person for somebody on their bad day, you need to know what that is, what that looks like. If they have a personality trait that they do when something's going off or something's wrong. Like for me, I can pick up in tones if somebody starts talking differently, if somebody responds differently. I'm like, okay, something's off. So it's being able to be in a relationship where you know when something's off, what that off is, and how to support somebody through that. But again, being able to keep checking in with yourself. And I'm throwing, as we wrap up, throwing that back to Blake. You know, as somebody who might be supporting somebody through a mental health challenge, or just somebody who's had those behaviors, not necessarily a diagnosis. What are some things that you would tell somebody that they would need to do to keep track of themselves?
I would say definitely journal. Like you got to write this stuff down some days. That's something that I've done for many years in my life. Um, my new journal or diary is literally my podcast at this point, because now I go back and I listen to earlier episodes and I'm like, dang, I was thinking that. That's where I was, and and so I've been able to document kind of how I've been feeling, how I've been dealing with things, and so when I'm able to look back at the things I've written down and be able to look at the documentation from how I've just been living and experiencing mental illness symptoms and things like that, it gives me more clarity, and it allows me opportunity to really reflect and look at things, even after the moment. I think a lot of times when we're in the moment of dealing with mental illness and symptoms, we don't think to write things down or to document and things like that. But though that has been one of the things that has been important for me, because now I'm able to track, I'm able to see patterns, because I've also become intentional about getting to the bottom of it, or not only say getting to the bottom of, being intentional about managing my overall mental health and wellness. So that would be my advice, is to document. And then the last thing I'll say is just be prepared to accept the journey and to go through the ups and downs, because it's not easy. It's not cute. Healing is not fun. I know it's kind of like a new thing, a new wave right now, but it's a very difficult process, but it's extremely, like, I can't even put into words like how beneficial and rewarding it is. It's opened so many doors and opportunities for me just to want to have a better version of myself each and every day. So that's what I would say to that.
Absolutely. And I like your journaling idea or method, because I do voice memos. So it's funny that you said, your podcast is really basically based on a verbal, the journal. I will record. If something's going on, I'll just put my voice on my voice memo on my phone. And I have a way to go back and look at some of the things I've experienced and learn from that again. And it's something about hearing your own voice talking to you when you're in different phases in your life. And
Mhm.
I really can't explain it other than if you do it yourself. Anybody who does it themselves, they'll know. It's like, it's something about hearing your voice coming back at you at different phases in your life that it does something to you on a subconscious level. So
Yeah.
Blake is saying it, I'm saying it too. It's every phone, I say voice memos, every phone typically has the ability to do it. Throw your voice out there. You don't have to share it like on a podcast unless you want to. But you can keep track of your healing that way.
Mhm.
And like Blake said too, I journal. I have so many flipping journals. Like sometimes I'll just be going through my room and I'll find one and I'm like, where did that come from? So absolutely process it out. Because one thing I will say as we get to wrapping this up is emotions that aren't processed come through in behaviors. So just because you're not talking about it does not mean it's not impacting you, because it does come through. And when you are able to provide some control over how it happens, it can be a much more therapeutic situation versus ignoring it. And then when these behaviors start, they're coming out in a way that you were not expecting or that can scare you. So we definitely want to make sure that you know what's going on, be able to pinpoint it back and then address it accordingly, what works for you. And again, echoing what Blake said earlier, finding what works for you, because everything doesn't work for everybody. So you
Right.
have to find what works for you. So as we end out, I just want to allow everyone to give any type of supporting message to listeners who might be going through their own struggles, as our way to kind of have an inclusion, to let them be seen and let them know they are seen and that people are here to support you. So I'll go ahead and start with Keisha. If someone's listening who is going through this, who is fearful, who might not have a diagnosis, but they're scared to make that next step, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, you are not alone. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. When it comes down to mental health, it's okay. And to definitely reach out to an agency for which you trust to get that help. A lot of people shy away from going to state agencies, like, I think what am I trying to say? Every county has like a mental health agency. So people kind of shy away from that. So even if it's just going to individual counseling or even starting off with a support group somewhere, know that you're not alone and it is okay. And you can get that necessary help. Reach out to someone that you feel more comfortable with sharing with. And if that doesn't work, the first person that you reach out to, if you don't feel that connection or that bond, then don't stop there. Reach out to somebody else until you get that connection with a professional that can help you along the way.
Absolutely. And Felipe, how about you? What would be your word of encouragement for somebody who might be listening, who it might not be ready to take that next step, but they know they need to?
All of you had great suggestions. There's not many that go beyond that. You know what I'm saying? Consult with somebody you trust. Consult with one of your supports. Talk to one of your friends or family members that, are positively supportive of you. There's online forums that could be supportive as well. You know what I'm saying? And that's really, that pretty much summed it up, as y'all often do.
And Blake, how about you? What would be your closing remarks for somebody who might be scared or might not know exactly what needs to be done, but they know something needs to be done?
I'm going to echo somewhat similar to what Felipe said, which is that finding communities online, that's been my saving grace. Through like my initial community I came in, I got to give a shout out to Let's Talk Bro podcast. That allowed me to really dive in online and try to find other communities. And I found so many resources, just so much help and support through being intentional about how I show up and what spaces I engage with online. Another piece of advice I'll give is that therapy comes in a variety of forms. Some of my therapy that I do is podcasting, exercising, eating, going outside, going for walks. Of course, I recommend you go and see a professional, but there's other things that you can do to manage whatever it is you're dealing with and to help yourself heal. I think self-care is the best care that you can ever give to yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody else. And then just be willing and committed to evolve and change from wherever you are, and know that it's possible. I'm a living testament of that. I've, like I said early in the episode, I've had suicide attempts and I dealt with suicide ideation for many, 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 many years of my life. And I feel I'm on the other side of suicide at this point, and it's a beautiful place to be. So no matter what you're going through, what you're dealing with, there's someone out there that will help you. There's somebody that's on a similar journey to you, and the resources and help is out there. It does exist. You just have to really find it. And unfortunately, right now, it's very difficult, but it's possible.
Absolutely. And I'm echoing what everyone has said on there. The first step is awareness, knowing that you need it, knowing that you need the additional support. That's step number one. If you've already gotten to that level, you're moving in the right direction. But like Blake said, there's other ways. You don't have to just sit on someone's sofa and tell them about your whole life story. There's so many different ways to get therapeutic support. I'm a creative, obviously. So podcasting has been a huge therapy element for me. I have another podcast where it's just a bunch of FML moments in my life that I throw up out there for the world to see. And then I'm a creative as in painting. I paint and then I dive really deep into technology and computer stuff. So those are all therapeutic. So, but talking to somebody, you wouldn't think that's therapy, but it is. So broadening your mind to have an awareness that there's other things that are healthy options to bring you support is a different way to look at therapy. Looking at online support groups, online groups, connecting with people. Technology has allowed us to connect with people who live thousands and thousands of miles away, who might be able to say something that changes your whole world. So allow yourself to experience other things that can trigger or open up your mind in a positive way. So, and if you are listening and you do have mental health struggles, we see you, we hear you, we understand that it's scary when you want to wake up or get out the bed and you don't have the energy to. When you're sitting around people and all of a sudden your heart's starting to race and you don't know why, but you're terrified. When people start to pull away from you and how that makes you feel, you're not weak, you're strong because you're fighting battles every day that people know nothing about. And in my opinion, that's some of the strongest individuals because you're still here. You're still here. So I will make sure I'll have all the resources that we discussed in the pod notes and some additional stuff so you can go ahead and start your journey. And if you're already in the journey, to get any enhancements and anybody or any way you want to reach out to any of us that are on this session. It's been a really deep, heavy, emotional experience today. But I want you all to know that all of us are here to move you beyond in your journey. So as we close out, I'm going to pass and rotate around and let everybody know where to find all of us. And again, thank you so much for spending your time. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Felipe. If you want to go ahead and let the listeners know where they can find you and connect with you off the podcast.
Felipe Blue, Durham, North Carolina. You can reach me and find out more about the movement at morethanTherapy.org.
Awesome. And how about you? Like, where can the listeners?
So you can search Diary of a Mad Black Man on any podcast app that you have on your phone to find my podcast. You can also go to diaryofamadblackman.com. That's my website. It has links to all my Instagram, social media platforms that I use. Diary of MBM on all social platforms. And yeah.
Thank you. And Keisha.
Hey, yes, you can reach me at koyabehaviorhealth.org. I'm also on Facebook as well as Instagram.
Awesome. And again, thank you all so much for participating in this very important topic. It's probably a topic that we would need a part A, or this was a part B to, because I just feel that once we bring up these topics, we always want to make sure that we close out. So if anybody who's listening has any emotions or anything that have been brought to the surface, definitely look at some of the resources that are in the pod notes that can kind of assist you with that. And with that being said, thank you all for spending this last hour with us. Hopefully you were able to learn and get some information that can help you on your journey. And we are so grateful that you have allowed us to be a part of that journey. So until our next episode, you guys take care, stay safe, and be well.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, even though mental health concepts might have been discussed, we are not a replacement for professional help. And if anything triggered you in this episode, please reach out to your local professional mental health specialist to seek assistance. You can also find us in the webs at The Looking Glass Podcast on Instagram and also on our YouTube channel, Through the Looking Glass. Check out some of our inserts, check out some of our guests, and our links to other guest podcasts. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to talk to you again.